The Raiders add more experience to their coaching staff, and ESPN's Joe Fortenbaugh says, go get your quarterback, his message to the Raiders. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 21st, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, you're checking us out on YouTube. Thank you. We appreciate that. The show grows each and every day, and that's awesome. It's a big deal, and it's a big deal because of you, Raider Nation. So shout out to you. Thanks so much for the support of the show, and also big thanks to my man Ari, who does a great job making sure we're on YouTube, looking good and sounding good each and every day. So you can shout him out, check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well, as many of you do, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. A lot of calls and texts we'll get to coming up in segment number 3. Matter of fact, got a tweet as well that we'll get to in segment number 3. A lot of feedback as we're getting closer and closer to the scouting combine coming up in Indianapolis next week, which I'll be at all week long. I'm excited about that. 321 players have been added to or invited to the combine there in Indy. So plenty of those guys will be members of the Raiders in 2024, and I'll have an opportunity to talk to each and every one of them. So I'm looking forward to that. But your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, ESPN's Joe Fortenbaugh, part of Carlin vs. Joe on ESPN Radio, sounded off and had a message that he wanted to send to the Raiders on his radio show on Tuesday where he said, go get the quarterback and let it be known. And it wasn't quite a rant, but it was a very aggressive message that he wanted to pass along. Of course, he's a guy that spent a long time in the Bay Area at 95.7 The Game, so he knows what the Raiders are all about. Also, most recently here in Las Vegas, he knows what the Raiders are about and kind of knows what the city is about and the fan base as well. So his message was very passionate. You'll hear that message. Plus, you'll also hear when he joined my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, on Raider Nation Radio 920, to kind of further explain himself. As soon as I heard what he had to say on his show on ESPN Radio, I reached out and said, Joe, I need you to come on and talk to Raider Nation. He said, I got you, Q, I got you. So you'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And off top, I mentioned that the Raiders added plenty of experience to the coaching staff for Antonio Pierce, and that's by way of Joe Philbin. And this came from Ian Rappaport, Rap Sheet from NFL Network, tweeted out, the Raiders are hiring former Dolphins head coach Joe Philbin as their new senior offensive assistant. After spending time as the Cowboys offensive line coach and the Ohio State senior analyst, Philbin is back in the NFL to lend experience to Antonio Pierce. Philbin, who's 62, spent the 2023 season as the offensive analyst with Ohio State. From 2020 to 2022, he was with the Cowboys as their offensive line coach and working with Mike McCarthy. And he was with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay from 2006 to 2011, where he was the offensive line coach. And then he was promoted to the offensive coordinator in 2007. Now, as a head coach, he wasn't that hot. I'm not a big fan of Joe Philbin as a head coach. He was a combined 24-28 record in 3 seasons as the head coach of the Dolphins from 2012 to 2015, and he was 2-2 as the Packers interim head coach following the firing of Mike McCarthy in 2018. So again, not a fan of Joe Philbin, the head coach, but I know that he has really good offensive line experience. He's also a guy that's got plenty of experience in the league. And the one thing that you could say is consistent about what Antonio Pierce is doing, he's adding plenty of experience on the coaching staff. He now has 2 former head coaches on his staff, in Marvin Lewis and Joe Philbin. And again, that's just going to help him with things that he doesn't know. And he understands what he knows and what he doesn't. And he leans on guys with experience. I'm not mad at that at all. I wasn't mad when he leaned on Adam Gase a little bit during the 2023 season while he was still the interim head coach. Of course, he had Marvin Lewis and Tom Coughlin. He's still going to lean on Tom Coughlin, has Marvin Lewis as assistant head coach, now has Joe Philbin as a senior offensive assistant. Now, I'll say this. Maybe he's going to bring on another guy still, but I don't know what this has to, what this says for Hugh Jackson, a guy that I talked to on Radio Row ahead of Super Bowl 58, a guy who I felt pretty confident was going to be added to the mix. And it's been crickets ever since he made his appearance on Radio Row. I don't know if he's going to be on the staff. I thought he was going to be probably a senior offensive assistant, but now Joe Philbin is playing that role. So maybe they're going to have another one, and that'll just be some more experience on the staff. But again, that's something to pay attention to and monitor, because I'm kind of surprised we haven't heard anything about Hugh Jackson. So kind of want to give a roundup on the latest coaches to be added. Again, running back coach is Carnell Cadillac Williams, played in the league for a handful of years with Tampa Bay. He was the interim head coach at Auburn in 2022, associate head coach and running back coach in 2023. Also, Rich Scangarello was hired as a quarterback coach. So he's been he was a Broncos offensive coordinator. He worked in Atlanta. He was there in Kentucky as the OC, but he most recently worked with Caleb Williams pre-draft preparation. Now he returns to the AFC West and joins the team in a market for a young quarterback. That was according to Tom Pelissero from NFL Network. Fred Walker is the assistant quarterbacks coach. He was already with the Raiders. They didn't hold on to many offensive coaches, but they did keep Fred Walker. He's going to be the offensive assistant, and he's been the offensive assistant for the last 2 seasons. He'll be the offensive assistant quarterbacks coach. So that's Fred Walker. So those are all the coaches as of late that have been added to the mix when it comes to the Raiders and their coaching staff. And again, still paying attention to see what's going on with Hugh Jackson, see if he's added sooner rather than later. Now, I had a couple sound bites that I wanted to bring to the table as well from Matt Miller from NFL. He's an NFL draft guru. He's on ESPN, does a fantastic job. He was on my radio show Game Night on Monday night on President's Day, as a matter of fact. And we talked to all things NFL draft, and a couple of his answers I thought really were good answers and pertain to Raider Nation and what the Raiders could be looking at in April's upcoming draft. So the first soundbite that I have from Matt Miller was my question to him about teams that are going to be aggressive, trying to trade up in efforts to go get one of those top-tier quarterbacks in this year's draft, just like the Raiders, who may be targeting Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Q, I think we're going to see a lot of teams want to move up, but it takes two to pull that off, right? And I think where we're at right now, with 1 overall being the Chicago Bears, 2 being the Washington Commanders, 3 being the New England Patriots, all 3 of those teams, if we line them up, would say their biggest need is without a doubt the quarterback position. So, you might have a Minnesota Vikings or a Las Vegas Raiders that want to move up and get their franchise quarterback, but those 3 teams at the top don't have a lot of incentive to move back. So you get into a spot where you better make a dang good offer. If you want to try to get to 1, 2, or 3, you're going to be overpaying, because we know Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May are very, very likely to come off the board in some order within those 3 picks.
So that's the biggest key right there, was what Matt Miller had to say about, there could be any of these teams to want to. The Raiders could try to trade up. Denver could try to trade up. Minnesota could try to trade up. Atlanta could try to trade up. All these teams that need quarterbacks, but if they don't have a trade partner, it's not going to happen. That's the same thing that Mel Kiper Jr. said when he was on my radio show, or I was actually on his radio show as well. Yeah, it'd be nice for the Raiders to get up to number 3 and go get Jaden Daniels, but you've got to have a team there that is willing to trade out. The team I look at that I think could be a possibility would be the Patriots. And it's funny, on Tuesday, Matt Miller actually tweeted out that he doesn't think that the Patriots should draft a quarterback, only because they're not a quarterback away. They're not in a position to have a rookie quarterback. They don't have a very good offensive line. They don't have very good weapons around them. He thinks that if they draft a quarterback right now, and it's only his opinion, that it'll be very similar to what happened in Carolina with Bryce Young, basically going to set the man up for failure because he doesn't have enough around him. They don't have enough around him to actually make him a successful quarterback. So that would be where I'm targeting, Raider Nation. I would look at number 3. That's where I'm going to stick at right there. If the Raiders are going to have an opportunity to move up and go get their quarterback of the future, in my opinion, in my hopes, it'd be Jaden Daniels. Number 3 is where they're going to have to get to, and they're going to have to hope he falls to number 3. Also, Matt Miller was asked about quarterbacks. What quarterback does he think has a chance to boost their draft stock throughout the draft process? Because we know there's going to be a quarterback that's not really being talked about as much right now, that maybe after the Combine or the Pro Day is talked about a lot more, and maybe even rumored to be a top 10 pick when it's all said and done. So here's Matt Miller on what quarterback he says to be on the lookout for that could boost their draft.
Yeah, I think there are 2 that are very likely, and that process is going to start next week. I will be settling in Indianapolis 1 week from today, getting ready for the scouting combine. Bo Nix from Oregon, started at Auburn, ended up at Oregon. Started more than 50 games in college. We saw him get better every year. 6'2", 220 with a good arm, really good mobility. I think once we get to the interview portion of the process, once we get to watch him throw in person later next week, he has a huge range to move up and be a top 15 pick. And then I would say J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, a guy who, unlike Bo Nix, didn't play a ton in college, a 2-year starter. They didn't throw the ball a lot at Michigan. He just turned 21 years old, and scouts are in love with the mobility, the arm strength, and who he is as a person as well. So we could go back a year in time. People liked Anthony Richardson. No one was talking about Anthony Richardson consistently as a top 5 pick 1 year ago. We went to Indy. He blew the doors off Lucas Oil with that workout. He had a great interview session with teams, and he becomes a top 5 pick. So there is certainly room for whether it's Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy to push themselves way up into the first round.
So there you go. You hear him talking about J.J. McCarthy, and I brought him up because, well, J.J. McCarthy is a guy that we've talked about quite a bit here on the show. We've had people call in, text in. Yeah, he's a good one. No, he's not a good one. Go get him. Don't go get him. Wait for him. Don't wait. All that. So we've had a lot of different conversations, and a lot of it is because, well, what he did at college. So my follow-up question on J.J. McCarthy to Matt Miller was, well, how do we know? What have you seen that makes you feel like he's going to be that franchise quarterback on the next level that we didn't get to see from him in college because he didn't do a whole lot in college with Michigan?
Our job is asking this one question. Is it what a player can't do, or is it what a player wasn't asked to do? So when I watch J.J. McCarthy, I see a lot of things that he wasn't asked to do because they were such a run-heavy offense. So it's not that he couldn't do it, that we didn't get a chance to see him. They only threw the ball 332 times last year. That is well below what we saw guys like Jaden Daniels and Drake May and even Caleb Williams do. So with McCarthy, the biggest question is going to be, what can he do outside the framework of that scheme and system? I want to see him throw on time. I want to see him rip some of those deep passes. He has good velocity when he's throwing short to intermediate. You want to see how well that translates when he's throwing 20, 25-yard outs. Also, this is a guy who's not a super big quarterback. He's 6'3", listed at 200 pounds. He looks lean on tape. For myself and for other evaluators, seeing him in person is a huge part of the puzzle. We didn't get to see him at the Senior Bowl, didn't get to see him at the Shrine Game. And as a junior coming out, haven't had as much exposure to him in person. So even little things, last year all the conversation was Bryce Young. How much is he going to weigh? How thin is he going to be? This year, we haven't talked about it as much as Bryce Young, but I think for J.J. McCarthy, it's going to be, all right, what does he look like in person standing next to a Drake May who's 6'4", 230? What does he look like next to Bo Nix, who's every bit of 220, Michael Penix, who's 220 pounds, Jaden Daniels, who's 6'4"? The size question is going to be a big component here.
So there you go. That's Matt Miller's breakdown of J.J. McCarthy and why he believes that he could be that guy on the next level. But again, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen great production. You saw Jaden Daniels go win the Heisman Trophy on a team in LSU where the defense was bad, and he didn't play in a championship game, so he wasn't even seeing that last weekend of college football, and still went and won the Heisman Trophy because what he was able to do with his arm, what he was able to do with his legs, and just him being a dynamic player. So you'll hear all about him. Plus, the Raiders need to go get their quarterback. Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN Radio screams it from the mighty heavens, right? Screams it as loud as you can. Go get your quarterback. He'll explain why. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. With the NFL season over, it's all about the NBA and hoops. Get buckets right now with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins, just like that. You could bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. You know what I say. You're guaranteed to miss a shot you don't take. So get on FanDuel right now. Take your shot, win some money, and have a lot of fun with it. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want you to hear what Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN Radio had to say about go get the quarterback. And it's funny, it happened on ESPN Radio, and this happened while I was actually doing my radio show on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness. So we were on the radio at the same time. Of course, I do ESPN Radio as well at night on game night, but that's well after his show, Carlin vs. Joe, is over. But luckily, the fine folks at ESPN decided to tweet the soundbite to me. And when I heard it, I immediately thought, okay, we need to make sure we get Joe on the show to talk about this. So this is what Joe Fortenbaugh had to say to the Raiders. This is the message he wanted to send to the Raiders about the quarterback position from his show on ESPN Radio. He was in with Ian Fitzsimmons. It was Ian Fitzsimmons and Joe Fortenbaugh. The show's called Carlin vs. Joe. But this is what Fortenbaugh had to say about the quarterback position.
The Raiders are irrelevant in their own city. The hockey team has won a Stanley Cup. The women's basketball team has won back-to-back WNBA championships. The city hosted a Super Bowl. Formula One is there every year. The
draft.
Raiders are irrelevant.
The draft was there.
Go get the quarterback. The draft was there. Everything. It's we don't want to give up the picks. There's no guarantee you're going to hit on those picks anyway. I mean, look at the Titans and the Browns. They got all those picks from the Eagles and the Rams. It didn't matter. Those teams still went on to win Super Bowls with other quarterbacks.
So the only thing I didn't agree with what he had to say there was the Raiders are irrelevant, but I understood what he was trying to say. He was trying to say as far as based off of winning championships, winning at the level that they're supposed to be, especially in Las Vegas where winning matters, right? The team is not going to be supported by the locals if they're not winning consistently. We've talked about that a lot when it comes to fans in the stands. We talked about it a lot when it just comes to, having a home field advantage, everything, right? I mean, they've got to produce a winner. And unfortunately for the Raiders, they have not done enough of that at Allegiant Stadium since they've been here, in my opinion. So, again, was able to get Joe on the show to further explain what he had to say, what you heard earlier here in segment number 2. So here's that conversation. I thought some really good stuff that had me fired up. Myself and Joe Fortenbaugh from my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, on Raider Nation Radio 920. Joe, thanks so much for your time. And it's funny, man, a lot of people heard what you had to say and was like, wait, hold on, the Raiders aren't irrelevant. But you're talking about from a standpoint of winning championships and winning in general. And they just obviously have not done enough of that. And a lot of that has to do with not having the quarterback that can get it done. That's my interpretation of what you had to say.
21 years, Q. 21 years since the Raiders have won a playoff game.
Right.
The only team with a longer drought is Miami at 23. It's like, what are we doing, right? Like,
Right.
I know Mark wants to win. I know the city cares about the Raiders. But think about what the Knights mean to that town. You live there. Your listeners are well aware of this. I used to live there 2 different 3-year stints. I miss it every single day. The Raiders have an opportunity to win those people over. But the thing is, you got to give them something. Vegas loves a winner. You got to start winning at some point. You see what the Chiefs are doing. Denver went out and got Sean Payton last year. The Chargers just went out and got Jim Harbaugh. Make a move. Make a move. My entire point here is that when you give up this arsenal of picks to trade up, everyone talks about it being so expensive, right? Go back to 2016. The Rams moved up from 15-1 to get Jared Goff. Nobody cares about the picks. And nobody ended up caring about Goff. It didn't matter. They still went on to win a Super Bowl a few years later. They did it without him. The Eagles that same year moved up from number 8 to number 2 to draft Carson Wentz. They won a Super Bowl without Wentz. The picks didn't end up hurting them long term. And look at the 2 teams that were on the receiving end of those picks. The number 1 team that year was Tennessee. What have they done? The number 2 team was Cleveland. What have they done? We talk so much, it could be too expensive. Look, if you think Caleb Williams is the guy, if you think he's generational, go get him, because you're watching Kansas City right now. When you've got a generational guy, you have a chance to win Super Bowls every single year.
There's no doubt about that. Joe Fortenbaugh is our guest here on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Necessary Roughness. And, Joe, I've been saying that 13-3 I think is more realistic because I feel like Chicago's going to take Caleb and Washington's going to take whoever's next. But number 3, I feel like that's a sweet spot where there could be a trade. What do you think? Like you said, the picks are irrelevant. But what do you think just it would cost to get up there?
Well, it's probably going to be based on what moves happen first, right? Like, we're going to look at history, and I would imagine the Bears, if they trade that pick, that would end up being the first move. So everyone's going to look at that haul, and then it's going to come down to who's moving up. So Raiders 13-3. New England's going to want a boatload of picks at number 3 if they're going to trade out because they need a quarterback as well. But, I mean, again, it comes down to your evaluation. Mm-hmm. Like, if you trust your evaluators and your evaluators believe the guy can come in and play, and you trust your coaching staff, and you got Devontae Adams there. And, just everything that's sitting there, why not do it? What are you going to do? You're going to sit around and you're going to settle for, like, Michael Penix and think maybe that can happen. Look at the Atlanta Falcons. I think
Right.
they're a perfect example. They needed a quarterback. They were sitting around. Desmond Ridder was available in round 3 or whatever it was, and they went ahead and said, okay, we'll take a try on Ridder. So they draft Ridder. Nice guy, good worker, good career at Cincinnati, but not a pro quarterback because he can't make all the throws. So now they're going to give this kid a try, which they do, and they waste all this time trying to figure out if he's the guy when most people know he isn't, and then it turns out it doesn't work, and then your coach gets fired, and then you bring in a new guy, and you need to restart the whole thing. Like, stop with the half measures. If the guy is your guy, go get him. Otherwise, what's the point of drafting him? Are you just hoping? Is that what you're playing? Is it just a game of Battleship? B5, miss. Okay, D11, hit. Okay, great. Like, that's not a realistic strategy for building a football team. Raiders might not be interested at this at all, and I could totally understand that. But with the way that division's played out and the fact that you're in Vegas and everybody else is winning, like, at some point you got to do something. It's been 21 years since you won a playoff game. Go make a move. Do something. Get people fired up.
I am with you 100%, man. You're getting me fired up just talking about it. Again, Joe Fortenbaugh from Carlin vs. Joe on ESPN Radio is our guest here on Raider Nation Radio 920. The guy I'm looking at, Joe, is Jaden Daniels, one, because of the relationship with Antonio Pierce. I just think that means something. Just like we saw Jack Jones get picked up off of waivers, AP was tight with him, and it worked out really well for the Silver and Black. What are your thoughts? I know it's early. The Combine doesn't even happen yet, but what are your early thoughts on Jaden Daniels?
Daniels is so interesting, man. He's a complete package when it comes to an athlete. And if you look at LSU, and a lot of people, if they didn't pay attention, they don't realize this. LSU's defense stunk last year, man. They stunk. The only reason that team was in games was because of Daniels. Daniels was making plays everywhere. Like, he was putting up video game numbers. Think about this. He won the Heisman Trophy without even playing on championship weekend. Bo Nix and Michael Penix went head-to-head for all the voters to see. Everybody who played in the championship game had one extra game and had the opportunity to benefit greatly from recency bias. Voters see it, and then they turn in their vote that, next day. It's due Monday after the championship games on Saturday. So all those guys could have gone out there and stole it from him. He wasn't even playing. And he still won the damn award because he was that good. He's got the size. I think there's a lot to like there. I really do. He was a total gamer at LSU. I think he's a very intriguing prospect. The odds say Drake May is the favorite to go number 2, another great prospect, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Daniels. I mean, he really turned some heads last year at LSU.
What did you think about Antonio Pierce, what he did as an interim coach, and now obviously being the full-time coach of the Silver and Black?
Tough job, right? You're taking over a team that got rid of the head coach. Culture is in a rough spot. You got to try to rally the players in the locker room. You got to try to get them to buy in when they know the season's lost. You know, you look around the NFL, there were several teams that were in those spots, and the players completely packed it in. Like, the players packed it in at the end of the season with New England. Like, the Bears packed it in that last game against Green Bay. You could find a handful of teams that were just getting towards the end of the season, and it was all about 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Carolina didn't give a crap at the end of the season, right? Like, some of these teams just rolled over and died. And here comes Pierce. He found a way to get everyone's attention. He found a way to get everyone to buy in, and then he found a way to go out there and kick some butt. Like, they went to Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs on Christmas. I mean, that is a huge win. That type of game had all of us doubting whether or not Kansas City had any chance this year. And then Kansas City went out and won the damn Super Bowl. So I love the fact that he got the guys to buy in, because that's the biggest part of the battle. You got to form a culture. You got to get the players in the leadership group aligned. You got to get everyone pulling in the same direction. Pierce was able to do that. That's a big box check. Now moving forward, how is he going to coach them up? How are they going to build this team around his philosophies and his styles, and how they're going to take the next step? Got to address the quarterback position. Who's it going to be? Because if you don't get that addressed in a division where you're going against Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and whatever Denver ends up doing, it's not even going to matter, man. It's not even going to matter. If you're last in your own division, you're not going to the playoffs.
Again, I agree with 100%. Jaden Daniels is that guy. I think that should be the target. And I'm telling you, I've felt very comfortable saying throughout the course of the process, like, if they don't go and get into the top 3, maybe you can get a Bo Nix, maybe you can get a Michael Penix, maybe you can get a JJ McCarthy. But at this point, it just kind of feels like that's a settle. Now, that might be something that they have to do, right? Or they might not get a quarterback at all, right? They might say, you know what, we'll just run it back with Aiden O'Connell because we can't go get the guy that we want to get. But it just feels like anything else would be a settle outside of one of those top quarterbacks because you feel like that's really what they need to do. And listening to Joe and what he had to say and when he had his further explanation on my radio show, it just, again, makes all the sense in the world to put all the chips in the table and go get your guy, right? No matter what it's going to cost to go get him. If it takes 3 1s, a couple 2s, maybe a 5th-round pick as well, so be it. Right? I mean, you can go through the history of the Raiders and their draft picks, and I know that's not on Tom Telesco, but the Raiders as an organization haven't just been world beaters when it comes to great draft picks. So for everyone who's saying that you can't give that much up, I say why, right? You go back to 2014, all right, Khalil Mack, really great first-round pick. We get that. 2015, Amari Cooper, really good first-round pick. Obviously didn't stick around. After that, the only other first-round pick that was really successful, Colton Miller still on the team, and Josh Jacobs. And there's a question if he's going to still be on the team. Everyone else is long gone, right? No Jonathan Abram, no Cleve Ferrell, no Henry Ruggs, no Alex Leatherwood, no Carl Joseph, no Garyon Conley, right? No Damon Arnett. I mean, just, again, all these guys, first-round picks, no longer on the team. So I'm not really worried about it. And Tyree Wilson this last year, obviously the jury's still out. He was only, 1 year in the league, so I'm not going to put him in that conversation. But he's a guy that's got to step up or he'll be in that conversation as, another first-round pick that didn't work out. I'm not worried about what you got to give up, right? And as Joe pointed out in what he had to say to me on the radio, it made all the sense in the world. Go get the quarterback. That's what I think. That's what Joe thought. I thought it was a great point. I thought I just had to bring it to the podcast here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are coming up next, 707-654-4693 here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. To start off with a text from North Texas Raider. Said, what's up, Q? It's North Texas Raider. I was thinking today about Josh Jacobs. I know the prevailing thought here is that he's going to be let go and go to another team. But I wonder today, is that what AP wants? Coach strikes me as a guy that values leadership at the player level, and we all know it doesn't get much better than JJ when it comes to leadership. I do believe we've seen the peak of what JJ brings to the table. Whether that peak can plateau for a couple more seasons or he starts to decline, I don't know. But I do think his presence on the team brings an extra element that Coach AP both recognizes and respects. Anyways, as always, love what you do for the nation. North Texas Raider out. Thanks for the text. And it's funny, I had my guy Ed Graney from ESPN Las Vegas and the Las Vegas Review-Journal on my radio show on Tuesday, and I asked him about Josh Jacobs, and he brought up a really good point. He wonders if this will be a time when AP and Tom Telesco butt heads. We know that AP really respects the hell out of Josh Jacobs. He's called him, the engine that makes the team go, right? Everything goes through Josh Jacobs. He wants to have that guy on the squad. But we also know Tom Telesco and his history of running backs is not paying the guys. Like, look at Austin Eckler with the Chargers, right? I mean, you realize what they, the value that they put on him. So I could see Telesco saying, I don't want to pay this guy more than this amount of money. And AP saying, hey, I want to do everything we can to make sure we hold on to him. I don't know if that's really what's going to happen, but he brought up a good point when he said that. And I thought, I really hadn't thought about it that way. But that really could end up being the first kind of clash of the Titans, is if Telesco doesn't want to pay Josh Jacobs and rather see him walk and let Zamir White take over and maybe go draft another guy. And AP's like, nah, I got to have Josh Jacobs, bring him back. We'll see what happens when that they cross that road, but we'll know sooner rather than later, right? As the free agency, you can pay your guys now. You can sign your own free agent right now. You obviously have to wait till the new league year opens up to sign other free agents. So we'll see what happens. There's been no movement, and we'll see if there is. But thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. And Josh Jacobs is definitely a guy to pay attention to. Got a call from Fitz Raider out the 805. He's calling to talk about the upcoming draft and what options he thinks the Raiders have in April. Here he is, Fitz Raider out the 805.
What's up? This is Fitz Raider calling out of the 805. The show's always amazing. Great to listen to every day. Love all the conversation we have on it. I'm calling in to talk about the upcoming draft and our quarterback situation. I think we have two options as far as drafting a quarterback goes. I think that's trading up to get Jaden Daniels, just doing whatever it takes if we're confident he's our guy. Or we sit at 13 and hope Bo Nix is available at that pick, because that guy is as accurate as you can be for a college passer. mean, everyone saw what he did this year at Oregon, honestly, the past 2 years at Oregon. And then I was also thinking, as far as if we do want to move on from Devontae Adams, while we could still get something, would we be able to just get a first-round pick from the Jets from him, and then we hold the 10th and 13th pick to where we can just get a quarterback with one of them and just go best position available for the 13th, or solidify the right side of the line for us at the tackle position. And then, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you. Raiders!
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, there are different ways to approach it, but I feel like the Raiders have to, exhaust all options to try to get where they need to be that top 3 quarterback. It's funny. I tweeted that out on Tuesday when we were talking about what Joe Fortenbaugh had to say, and Jason Fitz was like, yeah, I know, but Q, it takes 2 to tango, which is the same thing you heard from Matt Miller in segment number 1. And I agree. But I just think that the Raiders need to go all in and do everything they can to at least attempt to get up there. Now, if a team just doesn't want to trade with you, you can't force them, right? And then that'll bring folks back to say, see, told you they should have lost a bunch of games and they'd be in position and wouldn't have to try to trade up. But then again, AP wouldn't have got the job if they didn't win games. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. They obviously had to win games down the stretch to be able to retain AP as the head coach. And now they're in the position of want to get to the top 3 to go get that quarterback. And now they're going to have to trade to go do it. And hopefully a team will do that. Again, I'm looking at the New England Patriots, but they can do that. They can wait at 13, like you mentioned, and just get a guy. But I feel like I said, even though I'd be excited about Michael Penix because I think he's a hell of a player, I think, Bo Nix could be a hell of a player, J.J. McCarthy, but it just feels like at this point it'd be a settle, and nobody wants to have a settle, right? So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think the Raiders will get aggressive. My gut feeling tells me that they're not going to pick at 13 when it's all said and done. I don't know what that means, where they're going to get, but my gut feeling says they won't be picking at number 13. Thanks for the call. I appreciate you. Up next, I got a tweet from Jeff Barnett at One Nation Only on Twitter. He says, morning, Q. One Nation Jeff in SoCal here. Just wanted to say I wholeheartedly agree with doing whatever it takes to get our franchise quarterback. I like O'Connell, but in my opinion, his stealing is closer to DC than the top quarterbacks in the league. This is our best opportunity to grab that dynamic quarterback we've missed. If we don't, we'll be stuck in quarterback mediocrity again for the foreseeable future. The time is now. Go Raiders. That's from One Nation Only. That's One Nation Jeff in SoCal. And Jeff, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Again, I have nothing against Aiden O'Connell. I think some people get that twisted up sometimes. It's nothing against him. I just think the Raiders could do better. And 2 things could be true. You can like somebody and want more, right? Like I liked my car, but I wanted another one. Not that I had anything wrong with my car. I just wanted something new, right? And something better, something that I thought was a, more fancy car. And again, that's not, it's not the exact same thing, but it kind of is. Something doesn't have to be wrong, or a guy doesn't have to be bad to want more, to want better. It's just what it is. I mean, I talk about it all the time with the Chiefs. They had good with Alex Smith. They wanted better. They got Patrick Mahomes, and they've got 3 rings later. So there's that. So thanks so much for that tweet, my man. I definitely appreciate you, and I'm with you. One more call we got time for. Born Raider out of Oklahoma calling to talk about free agency and what his concern is with a big-ticket guy like Chris Jones or L'Jarius Sneed. Here he is, Born Raider out of Oklahoma.
What up, Q? Born Raider here, man, out of Oklahoma. I just wanted to call in and talk a little bit about the free agents and what we're looking at and stuff. And my main thing is just the red flag with signing a free agent that just came off winning a Super Bowl, kind of like L'Jarius Sneed, stuff like that, man. For some reason, I feel like if they get the Super Bowl checked off their list already, the rest of it's about money, you know what I mean? And if they're not willing to stay with the team that's winning Super Bowls, they're doing it for the money. And I don't know if you're going to get 100% out of them once they go to a team that's not quite as good as the team they were on. They're probably not going to like it as much, man, and they're not going to give you everything they could because they've already got the rings and they just need the money. See ya.
Thank you for the call. And yeah, man, that's the thing when it comes to free agency in general, not just Super Bowl winners like Chris Jones or L'Jarius Sneed, but free agency in general. You always have to look at, why are these guys free agents? Why is this team willing to let this guy go? And is it really going to be what we think it's going to be when we sign him, right? Regardless what team it is, Raiders or anyone else. Is this guy going to come perform, or is he going to do like you said? Is he there for a paycheck and that's it? That's why free agency is such a crapshoot. It's so hard to get the guys. And that's why I think that Dave Ziegler, even though I know a lot of people won't give him credit, I think he did a really good job with some of the free agents he brought in last season that were actually with the Raiders to go out there and play, like Marcus Epps, like Robert Spillane, right? Of course, Marcus Peters was a miss, but they got rid of him. Well, you got rid of him as soon as they got rid of him. They got rid of him after. That's right. AP got rid of him after Dave Ziegler was already gone. But they brought in guys that were free agents that wanted to play, like a Jacoby Myers, brought him in, wanted to play. He did some really good things. I liked him a lot, right? I mean, there was free agents that they brought in that weren't big, high-ticket guys that went out there and performed. But, when you go get a high-priced guy like a Chris Jones or L'Jarius Sneed, that's a risk you take. You just hope that they're still hungry and they go out there. That's why I kind of look at a Justin Matabuke from Baltimore and say he's only 26. He's going to still be hungry. He's going to still want more. If you can get that guy, you can land him, put him on the interior defensive line, you're really cooking with grease at that point. But you're right. It's always a crapshoot. It's always, it's why free agency is called fool's gold, because there's a reason why these guys are out there on the free agent market. But thanks so much for that call. Appreciate you. Got more calls and texts we'll get to on tomorrow's show. Got a call from Zach from SAC talking about Aiden O'Connell. We'll get to that. Some other text messages, a couple tweets as well. We'll have more news and notes and, of course, plenty of conversation as we do each and every day here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.